Okay, welcome to the chapter on language. The first thing we're going to talk about with this chapter is reading, and then we'll move on and talk about language in conversations. So the first is going to be on paper, and then we'll talk about verbal language. So when it comes to reading, one of the things that's involved in research on reading is this concept of online comprehension. And that's a really useful way to find out about how people understand and how people read is to actually monitor their reading while they're in the process of reading. So that's called online comprehension tasks. And by online, it just means in real time. It doesn't actually mean like over the internet. So make sure not to be confused about that. Again, online just means in real time. It doesn't necessarily have to involve a computer. It just means that it's a person in real time reading. So, an online comprehension task is a very broad term for any kind of activity that a person can be engaged in wherein their reading comprehension will be monitored in real time. So, maybe I'm being a little redundant here, but so it's a way to measure comprehension as it happens. So um, this wording, find a dynamic time or action-based task that yields measures of the underlying mental processes as they occur. So dynamic means something that changes with time. So it would be actions in real time that change through time. So something that's not stagnant is dynamic. And then you can have different conditions where people have to do different things or comprehend different kinds of things, or maybe they have time constraints or different things like that might increase or decrease the difficulty, and you can see how that'll affect how much they are able to understand or how far along in reading that they get. And then based on these kinds of studies, you can find out more about cognition, and also this kind of information can be used in creating all kinds of things that might be more user friendly. Like, for instance, if there's a website that's very cognitively taxing, then people probably won't like to go to that website as much because it's kind of like it's not as good for your mind. Like, it's not as easy to use, and it's not very user friendly. It's cognitively taxing. People don't tend to like those kinds of things. So this kind of information can also come in handy in things like marketing and stuff like that. Okay. So as far as written language goes, something that you can do is have a sentence appear on a screen, and then right after that, a probe word might appear, and you can say if that probe was in the sentence or not. Or you might just read the word, or you might say if the word is a word or if it's a non-word. So those are just different kinds of ways that you can do some kind of online comprehension, and that'll kind of tell us a little bit about what's going on in the person's head, depending on different constraints involved in that task. And it can it's a way that we can get to the bottom of what's going on in someone's head and how working memory might factor into things and stuff like that. There's this concept of mental structure building, and this concept is definitely mentioned in the book, but it's a good example to show how online studies could kind of show what's going on in someone's head. And the basic hypothesis is that you would have something like enhancement and suppression going on in your head as you hear or read a sentence. So the concept of enhancement, you could think of that like activation in a computational model, and suppression as inhibition, right? Because certain things are going to be primed, and so they'll be easier to think of, and then other things might be inhibited, so they'll be more difficult to conjure up relative to other things that might have been primed. So, So for this one, you could just see how long it takes someone to process a sentence or understand something going on. So according to this hypothesis, you would have these hypothetical activation curves for the concepts Dave, exam, and professor from the Dave story in the text. And the text is over here on the side of the screen over here. The Dave story with idea numbers. And then each of these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, would correspond to these. So these numbers aren't directly, like the relationship in time is not necessarily the same time difference between these. So just don't think that as we read it, but I'm going to explain it further. Bear with me. And then each of these curves is a different concept. So Dave would be this curve, and this, the curve for the Dave concept shows how much this concept would theoretically be activated in the process of talking about these things. And then this is the word exam and professor. So if we start right here, Dave was studying hard for his statistics midterm because the professor had a reputation for giving difficult exams. The students knew they'd have to be well prepared. Dave wanted an A on that test. Okay, so Dave starts out not activated. Everything starts out not activated. And then as we're talking about Dave studying hard for his midterms, blah, 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 the professor had a reputation for giving difficult exams. And then right here, and then professor gets activated when you say the professor has a reputation for giving hard exams. That and Dave are both activated in that area. But then it goes on to say the students knew they'd have to be well prepared, and it kind of starts to show that this is going to be, we're going to continue talking about Dave. And so Dave comes up to be more activated again when we say he wanted an A on that test. At this point, around concept number 6, where we start to say Dave wanted an A on that test, we're thinking less and less and less about the professor. And so at this point, if someone would, in sentence number 9, start and say something like, and he taught philosophy last semester, then the person who is reading the sentence, or maybe even you right now, would be like, who? Dave taught philosophy last semester? I thought Dave was taking classes. Because Dave is so activated, so if you used something like he right here, it would activate Dave and not professor. So I hope that kind of clears up this little graphic right here. So that's an example of kind of one way that you could do a study is to see, and then if we did this next sentence, we could make the 9th sentence either about Dave or about the exam or about the professor. And based on this hypothesis, you should see different reaction times for sentence number 9, right? And even if we asked if one of these was in this passage, then you should also see reaction times for that corresponding to this hypothesis. Dave should have the shortest reaction time because it's the most likely, the highest primed concept. Professor's actually repressed, so it should have the longest reaction time of all 3 concepts. And there's other ways to do online comprehension as well. Magliano and Gracier actually use a 3-pronged approach of measuring reading times with things like memory probes, and that's kind of the kind of stuff I was just now talking about. Also do discourse analysis and see different ways that people take turns, how many disfluencies there are in the conversation, like incomplete words or interruptions or use of hedges, things like and things like that. And they'll also do verbal protocols where someone's actually using some kind of computer system and walking through the process of using it out loud. So they'll say, okay, right now I am moving my mouse and I'm reading this and I'm looking at this and I'm kind of confused about this word prompt, things like that. That's what a verbal protocol is where they actually speak about their experience while they're doing something. Or they might go through a task and have it videotaped and then later watch themselves go through it and kind of narrate what they were thinking when they were doing it the first time.